Welcome to Dairy Pod, a podcast series from Dairy Australia. Featuring a range of experts, each episode offers insights into Australia's unique dairy farming conditions, as well as personal experiences and the latest in dairy innovation. Welcome to this podcast where we're going to delve into how to minimise the impact of fall armyworm on maize, sorghum and other cereal crops and pastures grown for dairy cattle. I am Brenda McLachlan with Dairy Australia, and to discuss fall armyworm we have Dr. Ross Pomroy, who is a principal agronomist with Nutrien Ag Solutions. Ross grew up on a dairy farm in the McLachlan region and currently owns a grain cropping cattle business on the Darling Downs. Ross has dealt with the fall armyworm firsthand. We are going to tap into Ross's experience and for his advice as to how to tackle this pest in the upcoming seasons. Welcome, Ross. Thank you for attending this podcast.
No problems.
Ross, in your experience as an agronomist, what has been the full impact of the fall armyworm since it's first entered Australia, and in particular on the Darling Downs? What have you seen?
Probably start and say that I used to love growing corn, being involved in the growing of corn and managing of corn. It was a great crop, had great management, marketing and management options for weed control. Very little insecticides were required. However, since the fall armyworm have come in, we had some light pressure in 2020. Moderate pressure in 2021, and then from last year, some quite significant pressure coming in. And from that, we have been required to apply several insecticides, up to 6 insecticides for late planted corn. Also the diligence required to check corn now, which it's a weekly, at least weekly and bi-weekly checks from 2-leaf all the way through to mid-grain, the end of grain fill.
Thank you. So you have seen quite the devastation throughout the area, not only in corn but other crops.
Yes, corn's their primary for sure, but they also have had significant devastation to millets. And last year was the first time we have seen in large numbers in sorghum. And to be honest with you, it's the first time in the world that I know of that that they were actually eating and attacking the grain sorghum.
Look, as an agronomist, what would you give advice to dairy farmers as a best management?
Okay, the first option, knowing dairy farmers, is they need help. They will need help to check these crops, because it's not like a plant and forget anymore.
Help from who?
Help from agronomists, be it a reseller, be it a private agronomist, be it the kids. We need to be in the paddock now. You need to be checking the paddocks, and you can't be driving past them anymore. That's probably the most important thing. We need to be able to be in the crop for maize and even grain and forage sorghum. These crops now need to be looked at, when it used to be a place where we used to plant the crop, and then the next step was actually to open the gate up, let the cows in. That's not happening anymore. Another thing is early planting. I found with the early planting of the summer cereals, so that be millet, your grain sorghum, forage sorghums, or your corn, they need to be planted early in their windows. And in the oats and barley situation, and wheat, we don't want to be planting too early. We want to be looking at the after February plantings. We don't want the continuation of that green bridge moving from the corn and sorghum into our oats. So we, again, planting just slightly later, not too early in the window.
So going over that again, Ross, so with the planting of maize and sorghum, you go early?
Yes.
But when it comes to next year, planting oats or barley or wheat?
Yes, so that during a summer period, they build up their generation. So during the cooler months, they, unless if frost can cause damage, but in the cooler months, their life cycles is out to 30 days, even longer, 35 days. But once we get to the warmer months, it can be as short as 14 days to go from a very small larvae through to a moth that's laying eggs. So it can go through that pupae to adult stages very, very quickly. Therefore, we build up generations very quickly in those summer months. Therefore, the amount of generations we have also replicate, will keep replicating numbers and then keep increasing numbers. What we want to do is to actually slow that population down. So we start early to have low generations, or we don't want to be planting oats too early to have those high generations moving into it. As I said, we've had it here for 4 years, but to see what they were able to do last season was very scary. The numbers, it's never stopped. Again, it was never going to be a situation where I wanted to actually spray a corn crop 6 times in the season just so I could actually have it there for harvest time.
6 times is a lot.
Last year was by far the most significant pressure we had in the Darling Downs area. And again, we don't know if that's going to be a continuation, but unfortunately, we are already seeing pressure, low pressure, but pressure already in our corn that was planted in August this season. So I've got corn leaf, 3-leaf corn, and I have a plot in that in hot spots areas. And I've got an area around the Capan area, which is around about 20% infection already.
That's not looking good, is it?
Well, it's not what we were planning for. Again, we still believe that planting early will give us the best option to minimise the number of generations in that crop. But we are still learning how they develop over that winter months. We were hoping the cooler months would definitely slow them down, which they have, but we didn't know how quickly those local generations were going to build up.
So what are your plans right now?
Scouting the paddock, making sure that I get to identify where the hotspots, and that's how it starts. It starts with hotspots in the paddock. So I can't just check from the gateway and say, oh, the crop looks good. I can't drive past. I can't even ride through it on a motorbike. You need to get off and actually have a look for some very minor damage, minor chewing, and you need to pull apart the plants and have a really good look. And they're identifying the larvae. Now, once you learn how to identify those larvae, they're quite easy to identify, but you need to go to all different spots. 4 spots, say on a 40-hectare paddock, I would be checking that about 4 times in one check per week, or even if I was a bit concerned about what I was finding, I'd even check maybe twice in a week. But I'll be checking different spots, making sure I identify the hot spots and making sure I identify what grubs and I can get some counts.
Okay, so at what point do you think it'll start going into sorghum?
Last year, we had it in sorghum. We were planted late in November, and in those November plantings, we actually had them infest from about 3 to 4 leaf stages. But again, it was the later planting. From an earlier planting point of view, I feel the generations and the grubs will prefer to be in the corn and maize crops versus sorghum. But once the generations build up, I think they'll overflow into those sorghum paddocks.
So that makes it really difficult, doesn't it, for farmers to do? It's this it's vigilance and really getting out there, walking the paddock and really checking.
Yeah.
Under the leaves?
Yeah, pulling the leaves out. So everyone knows a corn plant, a sorghum plant, pull it out of the ground and literally pull the whorl out of the bottom of the plant and unwrap those leaves. So you can really identify is what you're trying to identify initially is neonate starches, which is 1 to 2 millimetre. That's what you're trying to chase or identify. You will even see, you'll be surprised, a little bit few holes through the leaves already on this 1 or 2 millimetre neonate larvae. And you want to identify them at that stage, and therefore you can get trends of what's happening in your paddock. So you can identify, okay, I've got a very small here, leading into a small, and you can identify those trends. You can really identify the numbers and the quantity or qualitative assessment of what damage has been occurred.
So this needs to be recorded, doesn't it? Recorded, and then when you say a trend, that's when they talk to their agronomist, or what?
Well,
they do
exactly. So they're undertaking a scouting. The agronomist should be undertaking a scouting report. So a report should go to the grower. They should be ascertaining the size of the larvae, the number of larvae, the infected plants, the level of damage that's occurring. And then they need to talk to the grower about what the management plan potentially to go forward. So the grower is not going to be surprised when something's going forward. Also, the grower, you need from an agronomy point of view, he needs to know what the grower's intending on it. Is he going to water it? Should he be spraying before water? After water? Is he going to fertilise? Is he going to be busier next week? Those sort of things. But again, because it's paramount, as I mentioned, they can breed up so quickly and they can go from a very small larvae, which do a little bit of damage, which is what we've got to ascertain the trend is that moves out to a larger larvae. But the large larvae can do considerable amount of damage and that will be the ones that impact the crop. That's why I said you've got to be in the paddock very early, and therefore you can ascertain those trends and making sure. And if you identify hotspots, that's the first sign you need to be a bit more vigilant. You go, okay, they're here. And therefore you go, okay, I know they're here. Let's go and look at other spots in the paddock. So once you identify you've got a problem, and therefore you can look at those, what level of damage. Now in dry conditions, the plants might grow really slowly, and therefore the grub damage could be very significant because the plants are growing slowly, but the grubs aren't. They're going through their larval stages quite quickly. Hot, dry conditions, or even hot, humid is the worst because that's when the grubs love those stages. But if it's hot and the plants aren't growing very well because of dry conditions, there's significant damage. But if the plant is growing very, very well and putting and going through putting a leaf every 3 to 4 days, then the grub damage might be only minor for a plant because the plant's still able to produce carbohydrates, produce energy, and continue through its growth pattern. So you might be able to say, well, we can hold on this because the plant's growing away from the damage. But you still need to make sure you're monitoring that damage, you're monitoring the grub sizes, that you're not going to be left with larges and mediums, which are one, hard to kill because they're entrenched in the plant, and two, are actually consuming a lot more.
So under the 15 mil, when they see it, they need to spray at that point.
Yes. So you identifying numbers and that trend that's actually occurring. Not only that, you look at your beneficiaries as well. But I would target the small larvae. Once again, it also states it's on the label, on the chemical labels, because you need to target small larvae. One, they're easier to kill. It takes a lot less chemical to kill that larvae. And also if you're targeting larges and mediums, well, the damage has already been done. They've already consumed everything. They're actually going to go to ground pretty shortly, and the chemical's not going to actually do the same sort of be nearly as effective as you are if you're targeting the small, very small and medium larvae.
Yeah. So, Ross, for dairy farmers who have not seen the fall armyworm, there are identification charts around.
Every grub looks the same, I've been told. Not so much to a guy that becomes just a glorified bug checker like myself. Okay, the best identification charts I've seen so far, Queensland DPI, the Beat Sheet. It's a website. It's a very good website for identification charts, and so they've done very well there. But there are probably three main things I look at earlier on is it's very hard to identify a fall armyworm at a very small to a small stage. Once they get to about 6 to 7 millimeters, and you've got a handling, you can quite easily identify there's an inverted V on their forehead, and you can actually see that there are 4 raised dark dots on the second last segment of the larvae as well. And there's lateral lines, which I find that's the easiest at the young stage, white lateral lines that run down the side of the insect. Now, why they're different is because the main other pest that they can be confused with is Heliothis. Heliothis are always a lot hairier, and they don't have those lateral lines at a very early stage compared to the fall armyworm.
Yeah, so having said that, so they not to panic straight away, but to maybe collect them and take them into the agronomist or pull the agronomist out.
Pull the agronomist out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, once the stage you're looking at is a 1 to 3 millimeter. So it's quite hard to actually get a decent photo, clarity photo, without having.
Teeny.
Yeah, that's tiny. So it's it's them to get out. And then nature as well. The fall armyworm nature is very aggressive, like a Heliothis or Hippocova are nowhere near as aggressive when they're a younger stage. But a fall armyworm is very aggressive. And not only that, you can note the amount of damage that's being caused. On a Heliothis, very small or small grub, you won't even notice the damage to the leaves. It doesn't consume nearly as much. They're not as voracious. But I can open up a plant that I've got holes all the way up that new emerging leaf, and you open it up, there's a 1 to 3 millimeter grub, and you go, oh, you've eaten this much.
So they really are different to Heliothis.
It's significant more damage that we're seeing in those grass crops that we mentioned. Heliothis in Australia and Hippocova, they have a broader spectrum of crops. They will be involved with cotton, sorghum, corn, but also other broadleaf crops as well, soybeans and mung beans. Yet the fall armyworm at the moment are concentrating mainly on our grass crops, grass pastures as well. They have been found in lucerne and they have been found in soybeans, but the amount of damage they're causing in them it's pretty minor.
They are in lucerne. They are in Rhodes grass?
Rhodes grass, pasture grasses, yes.
Kikuyu?
Yes, yep.
And what about, I have heard that has been found in ryegrass and oats.
Yes.
Grazing oats.
The oats point of view, yes, we've seen significant damage only just on the southern downs this season. A farmer grew oats in the late February, started planting. They had a large infestation of larger grubs that moved into their crop. They move as an army.
You marched in, so there were not moths that flew in. They were actually the big caterpillar.
Combination of both. Even one thing, we had some weeds that may have already been in the paddock. When the weeds were destroyed, the large grubs went from the weeds into the oats and chewed them off at the ground. Also, you had the infestations of egg layers as well, and new infestations coming into that crop as well.
How large, just to let the dairy farmers know, how large was the oat plant that they were attacking? Do you know?
Well, very early tillering stage, very early tillering. The story I heard was the grower saw a nice green tinge across the paddock 1 week, came back the following week, and there was no green tinge left.
Now, I just wanted to go back over with the identification chart. You mentioned the beat sheet. So that is a Queensland government website. So if they want to look at an identification chart, go to the website that's called thebeatsheet.com.au and put in the search bar Fall Armyworm, and you'll be able to find a chart there to print out, because it's important to have that chart.
Also makes comparisons against the other common armyworms as well as Heliobacoba, Heliotis, and therefore you can actually look at pictures of the three different pests as well in the larvae stages, and you can get some better identification for those comparisons as well.
Yes. We also have on our Dairy Australia website a fact sheet, and in that fact sheet is an identification chart. So if you wish to go to the Dairy Australia website, once again, put in the search bar Fall Armyworm, and it'll take you to the Fall Armyworm section. Now, you have actually gone over, obviously, the identification of the Fall Armyworm, but some farmers have said we've got armyworm as well. The Fall Armyworm comes in all sorts of colours, doesn't it?
Yes. That's why you use those identification that I mentioned earlier on about the inverted V on the forehead. That's specific to the Fall Armyworm, to those 4 black dots on the second last segment on their body. That is it's also something that can easily identify as well. So we need to ensure you're addressing the crop before that stage comes. So before the tassel comes out, because you'll find large larvae on a corn crop can chew the tassel straight off. So if you have no tassel, you have no pollen. No pollen, you can't actually you won't actually pollinate any of the crop. So, and the same with the grain. Sorghum, you need it before the head comes out of the plant. You need to address the larvae before they move up and start attacking it. So it's being a little bit more proactive, and really, again, being in the paddock and identifying the numbers you've got. And again, those holes being drilled into the cob, that is will have a significant effect, not only yield, but quality, as I mentioned, because those holes get drilled in, you get water into those cobs, and you're not just losing that, but the grain from the feeding, you can use it from bald sput and all that.
You mentioned about you had sprayed your own crop. Are you able to mention what sort of things you sprayed and anything around the resistance, etc.? Because I have heard that some of the chemicals, the Fall Armyworm has become resistant.
Older chemistry that have been around the world. These Fall Armyworm have been around the world for a long time, and what's come into Australia have already came in with significant resistance to what we call older chemistry or basic pyrethroid chemistry, carbonate chemistries, and organic phosphates and those sort of things. They've already got resistance. So generic names. The larvae, the pyrethroids, synthetic pyrethroids like alpha scud, alpha cypermethrin, baphenol, those sort of ones we've used in the past, thicarb, to attack larvae, have been very disappointing results. So we're lucky enough that we have in the industry, we've got 4 or 5 chemistries that are working very, very well for us. One of them is actually a biological agent working as a virus, and an MPV, so it's called Forlagen. It's a product that we need to improve our use of, but because it's not actually providing the effectiveness that we desire on a one-hit wonder. Very, very good through lateral sprays, but just use it as a one-hit wonder. Unfortunately, it doesn't work as well as we'd like. The other chemistries we're using, there's a trade name called Fern, another one's called Bandicoot, and the other one's called Intrepid Edge. That allows us to have multiple different chemistries with different modes of action that we can apply. Therefore, we're not having to use the same chemistry consecutively.
And what would you let the dairy farmers know with these different chemicals? Read the label, withholding period, check on permits, because there are permits that go alongside that may be a little bit different.
That, again, your agronomist is the person. That's what he needs to know. That's what he does for a living. So having an agronomist, having someone at a reseller that can look up that information for you, that's their job. That's what they do. They don't do everything that you're doing. So talk to them. But there are ways to finding it out. The APVMA have got websites and portals. You can search all this information out. But again, leave that to the agronomist to do. Most of these products will have a minimum of 14-day withhold to grazing. All of them that I mentioned before will have a 14-day, except for a fern which has a 21-day to grazing or to harvest. So you need that period of time. Now, there is multiple labels that actually now incorporate the Fall Armyworm on their label, and Intrepid Edge is one. I will find the fern has a label claim for sorghum, but it has a permit for corn. So these chemicals do have permits and withholding periods are actually on those labels. There you go, and they're usually positioned on the second last page of the label or the permit. It's underneath the directions for use, and you'll see withholding periods. So when you look for that, you can go through and identify your crop and also identify the withholding period for that crop. You won't find the crop or the pest on the label. You'll find it more on the permit, unless it actually, therefore, your permit won't override what the label states. You'll find that until they actually change it on the label itself. So the permit comes first and the label comes second. So
it's complex, isn't it? It's not.
It's a slow process. It takes a while to get these through, because I appreciate this is why, and why it takes so long is to make sure that we understand the maximum residual levels allowed for milk and milk-based products to go through into our market, and not only that, our export market, which might have different MRLs. So this where the work is done by the chemical companies and by people like Dairy Australia as well, that spend a lot of time, effort, and energy to get that information so that these products are available.
Is there a point where you would say it's too damaged, do not spray? Or is there a point that you say hold off and not spray because you've got the biologicals, the beneficial insects?
Hard question.
It is a hard one.
So far we've had some really good seasons going forward. So we've always had moisture in the ground for the crop to continue to grow. But I always talk to my growers, the growers I talk to, I say, if you're going to plant a crop, intend to manage it. You don't plant the crop, but you don't intend to manage it. Now you're fully aware that these Fall Armyworm are here. You should be looking at, you should be continuing to investigate or look at what's happening in your crop. Therefore, you'll never get to a stage where you go, oh, gee, it's gone too far. You'll be able to identify that earlier on and apply management strategies if you want to at that stage, and knowing what moisture you have in the soil or what the forecast is predicting. So you're not going to get to that stage and have to draw a line. But we have had crops planted in January last year, sorghum crops, that my grower decided that he was not going to manage. Significant yield impact. Because of that scenario, he basically we sprayed it once, did a good job, but we had to leave it. And the crop grew very slowly. It had good moisture, but yield-wise did not get a very good yield at all. And but the benefit from having a crop growing helped us out biology and all those sort of things. So we took the benefit from that. But when it came down to the end result, we were significantly impacted.
Yes. Really valuable information, Ross, that you're giving the dairy farmers. There's been a question about fall armyworm traps. Is there a benefit to having traps, and Oh, where would you get them if there is a benefit?
All information, all really good information to have. But the fall armyworm traps, which are a pheromone trap to attract male moths, that's what the fall armyworm traps do. They do not represent what's happening in your paddock. You still got to go and have a look in your paddock, but they will give you an indication of what the potential is to happen in your paddock. If you've got in areas this year where I'm having already high pressure in my corn, I've got very high moth numbers in those traps. Where I've got very low pressure happening in my corn, I've got very low, but it doesn't give me an indication that I need to spray, that I need to manage. I still need to get in there and look for are they. So it gives you an indication, but it does not give you any sort of thresholds that you should be working off. So they're really good to have. I use a product from Biological Ag, and you'll find Bugs for Bugs is another one, but there's actually a list on the beat sheet. Again, type in pheromone trap, and they actually have a list of the pheromone traps and also how to manage those pheromone traps and how to identify the moths, because you can get some bycatch in those traps of Heliothus and other different moths. And so again, on the beat sheet, there's actually got that that identification of moths. The way I tell fall armyworm moth is got two little white fluffy tails, and they're quite easy to identify with other moths in there when they've got the nice white fluffy tails. They're quite easy. So
Yes. And how many would you put out in the paddock?
Oh, look, to me, yeah, it does vary a lot. But look, at the moment, I've only got 4 or 5 of the traps out myself. I do know the DPI. I have got other fall armyworm traps around the area to give you an indication. Again, I would suggest that you only need 1 per farm, and check them every 5 to 7 days and do some counts, and therefore you can, again, ascertain the trends if they're going up, staying stable.
And this certainly should be the case even if you haven't experienced fall armyworm on your farm.
I must admit, a few years ago, it was my feeling or my thought that they were coming from storm fronts. I was wrong. I'm feeling that they've got a local populations now that are building up locally and building up not only local area, but building up in your paddock. So if you let those grubs go through the pupae stage, which can only take 10, 14, 18 days in this sort of time period, with this sort of temperatures, it can move quite quickly. They can build up in your own paddock. But at the moment, what we have identified is they are still finding some sort of green bridge, and the conditions aren't too bad for them to continue through those cycles. I think some of the work that Melina's found in South Africa is they can handle down to -5-degree temperatures. So
that's alarming. But what sort of gems or final messages would you like to give to the dairy farmers?
In summer cereals, plant early. Learn to identify what a fall armyworm looks like. Get someone to help. Like an agronomist, like your reseller, get someone to help you. Maybe even look at broadleaf forage crops if planting outside the perfect window, looking at lab, looking at cowpea and those sort of things that may be another beneficial crop where you don't need to manage the fall armyworm in those crops if you're planting outside that early window. And look at the crops once a week at least, unfortunately, and don't just look from the gateway. Get into the crop, walk around, walk through the fence and get in there and have a look at multiple different spots. And it's not, unfortunately, these days, it's not a plant and forget. And we just need to be aware that we need to be in there and having a look at it. And obviously talk to your agronomist.
Yes. Well, Ross, thank you for your time and sharing your practical experience as an agronomist, being able to share that sort of information and reduce the impact. Really appreciate that.
I must admit, I've been very impressed with Dairy Australia and the industry itself. As I said, I'm doing a bit of research before I came on here, and you've had plenty of examinations looking at your maximum residual levels and things like that in the past, and you've had none, zero. It's the only industry in Australia that I know that can do that. So you guys are really looking after the industry and looking after our country and exports as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for joining today's Dairy Pod episode. We hope you found it enjoyable and insightful. For more information, check out the episode notes. You can stay up to date by following Dairy Pod on your favourite podcast platform. To get in touch, visit dairyaustralia.com.au. Until next time, take care.